As evening settles quietly and the world outside begins to slow, orchids offer a gentle subject for the wandering mind. They are among the most admired flowering plants on earth, yet much of their beauty comes not from extravagance, but from patience. Orchids are ancient plants, appearing tens of millions of years ago and gradually spreading across forests, mountains, grasslands, and tropical islands. Today, scientists estimate that there are more than 25,000 species of orchids growing naturally around the world, making them one of the largest families of flowering plants. This remarkable diversity means that orchids can appear in forms so different that they hardly seem related. Some are no larger than a fingernail, while others produce stems stretching several feet long. Some grow high in rainforest canopies where sunlight filters softly through layers of leaves, while others live on cool mountain slopes wrapped in mist. Yet despite these differences, orchids share a quiet elegance that has fascinated botanists and ordinary people alike for centuries. Their flowers seem almost carefully designed, with balanced shapes, graceful curves, and subtle patterns that invite a closer look. Perhaps one reason orchids feel so peaceful to observe is that they remind us of nature's slow creativity, where extraordinary beauty emerges not suddenly, but through countless small changes unfolding across immense stretches of time. The scientific story of orchids begins with adaptation. Unlike many plants that rely on a single strategy for survival, orchids have evolved an astonishing variety of ways to live in different environments. Many orchids are what botanists call epiphytes, meaning they grow attached to trees without taking nutrients from them. This often surprises people because epiphytes are not parasites. They simply use tree branches as a place to rest while gathering moisture and nutrients from rain, falling leaves, and humid air. In tropical rainforests, this strategy allows orchids to reach sunlight above the shaded forest floor. Their roots are specially adapted for this life high above the ground. These roots are covered with a remarkable tissue called velamen, a spongy outer layer made of dead cells that can quickly absorb water whenever rain arrives. The velamen also protects roots from drying out and helps reflect excess sunlight. When orchid roots appear silver or pale gray, what we are often seeing is this protective layer waiting patiently for moisture. After rain, the roots turn green as water fills the cells and photosynthesis begins more actively. It is a quiet and efficient system, shaped by millions of years of natural selection and perfectly suited to a world where water may arrive suddenly and disappear just as quickly. The flowers themselves are among the most fascinating structures in all of botany. At first glance, an orchid flower may seem delicate and decorative, but every curve has a purpose. Orchids have evolved extraordinarily specialized relationships with pollinators such as bees, butterflies, moths, birds, and even tiny flies. Many orchid flowers contain a distinctive petal called the labellum, often referred to as the lip. This structure serves as a landing platform, guiding visiting insects toward the flower's reproductive organs. In some species, the resemblance between flower and pollinator becomes almost unbelievable. Certain orchids mimic the appearance, scent, and texture of female insects so convincingly that male insects attempt to mate with the flower. During this process, pollen becomes attached to their bodies and is carried to another orchid. This phenomenon, known as sexual deception, may sound unusual, yet it is one of nature's most elegant examples of co-evolution. Over countless generations, orchids and their pollinators have shaped one another's evolution in subtle ways. The flower changes slightly, the insect responds, and the relationship continues, refined over thousands and millions of years in a slow biological conversation that still unfolds today. Not all orchids depend on deception, however. Many produce fragrances that drift gently through the air, attracting pollinators from surprising distances. Scientists studying orchid scents have discovered incredibly complex mixtures of aromatic compounds. Some orchids release their fragrance only at certain times of day, matching the activity patterns of their preferred pollinators. An orchid pollinated by moths may become most fragrant during the evening, when moths begin their nightly journeys. Others produce scents that humans find sweet and pleasant, while some imitate the smell of ripe fruit, tree sap, or even mushrooms. Each fragrance is a carefully evolved signal carrying information through invisible molecules suspended in the air. For the listener quietly settling into the night, there is something soothing about imagining these unseen exchanges taking place in distant forests. The orchid does not rush. It simply waits, releasing its fragrance with quiet precision, trusting the rhythms of nature that have guided its ancestors for ages beyond memory. One of the most extraordinary chapters in an orchid's life begins long before its first flower appears. Orchid seeds are astonishingly tiny, among the smallest seeds produced by flowering plants. A single seed is almost dust-like, so small that thousands may fit into a tiny capsule scarcely larger than a fingertip. Unlike most seeds, orchid seeds contain almost no stored food. This means that after landing on the ground, they cannot begin growing on their own. Instead, they rely on a partnership with microscopic fungi living in the soil. The fungus enters the seed and provides nutrients that allow the tiny orchid embryo to develop. This relationship, known as mycorrhizal symbiosis, is essential for many orchid species. Without these fungal partners, countless orchids would never sprout at all. The image is quietly humbling. One of the world's most admired flowers begins life dependent on organisms invisible to the human eye. Great beauty in this case emerges through cooperation rather than independence, through relationships so small and subtle that they often pass unnoticed beneath our feet. Because orchids grow slowly, patience becomes an important part of their story. Some species require years before producing their first flower. During this time, energy is devoted to roots, leaves, and the gradual accumulation of resources. The plant waits through changing seasons, responding to light, temperature, moisture, and countless environmental signals. Growth may appear almost invisible from day to day, yet beneath the surface complex biological processes continue steadily. Cells divide, tissues strengthen, and stored energy slowly increases. Then, almost quietly, a flower spike emerges. What appears sudden is actually the result of years of preparation. This slow unfolding may be one reason orchids feel so calming to observe. They remind us that nature often works at a pace very different from human schedules. Important changes may occur gradually, patiently, and without urgency, revealing themselves only after long periods of quiet development. And as we continue exploring the world of orchids, their hidden strategies for survival, their remarkable resilience, and the surprising ways they communicate with the environments around them begin to reveal an even deeper story. One shaped not by speed or competition alone, but by patience, adaptation, and an enduring partnership with the living world that surrounds them. Over the centuries, scientists have come to appreciate that orchids are not simply beautiful flowers decorating forests and gardens. They are highly sensitive observers of their surroundings, responding to subtle environmental changes with extraordinary precision. Light, for example, plays a gentle but powerful role in an orchid's life. Many species growing beneath rainforest canopies have adapted to receive soft, filtered sunlight rather than direct rays. Their leaves are often broad and rich in chlorophyll, allowing them to capture small amounts of light efficiently. In contrast, orchids that grow in brighter environments may possess thicker leaves with protective surfaces that reduce water loss. These differences are not random. They are the result of countless generations of adaptation, with each species gradually finding its own balance between sunlight, moisture, and temperature. When we see an orchid thriving in a particular place, we are witnessing the outcome of a long and quiet dialogue between plant and environment, a relationship refined over immense stretches of time until every leaf angle and every root structure becomes part of a finely tuned system of survival. Temperature also shapes the rhythm of an orchid's existence in surprisingly delicate ways. Some orchids flourish in warm tropical climates where temperatures remain relatively stable throughout the year. Others inhabit cool mountain forests where mist drifts slowly across slopes and nights can become surprisingly chilly. Certain species even rely on seasonal temperature changes to trigger flowering. A slight drop in nighttime temperature may signal that it is time to begin producing flower spikes. In this sense, orchids do not simply endure the passing seasons, they listen to them. Their cells contain molecular systems capable of sensing environmental cues and adjusting growth accordingly. Proteins become more active or less active, hormones shift in concentration, and tiny genetic pathways respond quietly to changing conditions. These invisible processes occur without haste, unfolding gradually as the plant aligns itself with the world around it. There is something reassuring in this patient responsiveness, a reminder that life often flourishes not through force, but through careful adjustment to circumstances as they gently evolve. Water, too, is managed with remarkable efficiency. Many orchids experience periods of abundant rain followed by stretches of dryness, particularly those living high in tropical trees. To survive these changing conditions, some orchids have evolved structures called pseudobulbs, swollen stems that store water and nutrients for future use. These natural reservoirs act like quiet savings accounts, allowing the plant to endure temporary shortages without distress. The leaves of many orchids are similarly adapted, with waxy surfaces that reduce evaporation and conserve moisture. Even their roots participate in this careful management of resources. The velamen surrounding the roots absorbs water rapidly when rain arrives, holding it briefly before directing it inward where it can be used slowly over time. Rather than seeking constant abundance, orchids have mastered the art of balance, gathering what they need, storing it wisely, and using it patiently. It is an approach that has allowed them to thrive across a vast range of environments, from humid jungles to rocky cliffs where water may be scarce for days or weeks. Some of the most enchanting orchids live in places that few people ever see, hidden deep within cloud forests, where cool air rises along mountainsides and condenses into gentle mist. Orchids cling to moss-covered branches suspended above the forest floor. In these environments, moisture hangs constantly in the air. Tiny droplets gather on leaves, drift across roots, and settle softly onto petals. The atmosphere is neither entirely wet nor entirely dry, but something delicately balanced between the two. Orchids adapted to these habitats often develop intricate root systems designed to capture moisture directly from the surrounding air. Their lives depend on these quiet exchanges with the atmosphere, absorbing water not only from rain but from clouds themselves. Scientists who study cloud forests sometimes describe them as water collectors for entire ecosystems, and orchids are among their most graceful inhabitants. Imagining these plants growing silently in cool mountain mists creates a peaceful picture, one where time seems to move more slowly and nature reveals its gentlest forms. Beyond their physical adaptations, orchids possess a remarkable genetic diversity that continues to fascinate researchers today. Their genomes contain clues to millions of years of evolutionary history, revealing how species separated, adapted, and diversified across continents. Through modern genetic studies, scientists have discovered that orchids evolved an impressive flexibility in controlling flower shape, color, and fragrance. Small changes in gene activity can produce dramatic differences in appearance, explaining why orchids display such extraordinary variety. Some flowers resemble stars, while others take shapes that evoke birds in flight, tiny slippers, dancing figures, or delicate insects. Yet beneath these outward differences lies a shared biological heritage connecting thousands of species through ancient evolutionary pathways. This combination of diversity and unity offers a gentle lesson from nature itself. Immense variation can emerge while preserving deeper patterns of connection, quietly linking countless forms of life across space and time. Perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries about orchids is their ability to communicate chemically with other living organisms. Beneath the soil, fungal networks connect roots and exchange nutrients in intricate partnerships. Above ground, flowers release chemical signals that attract specific pollinators while discouraging unwanted visitors. Even damaged plants may alter their chemistry in response to stress, activating protective mechanisms that help them recover or defend themselves. These exchanges are silent and invisible, yet they form part of an ongoing conversation woven throughout ecosystems. Orchids participate in this dialogue constantly, responding to information carried through scents, moisture, temperature, and microscopic relationships hidden from ordinary view. Far from being passive decorations of nature, they are active participants in complex ecological communities, continuously interacting with the world around them through processes both elegant and subtle. And perhaps this is one of the most soothing truths about orchids. Their lives are not defined by urgency. They do not hurry their growth, force their flowering, or struggle against every changing condition. Instead, they respond carefully, adapt patiently, and trust the quiet rhythms that have guided their species for millions of years. As their roots cling gently to bark, as mist gathers softly around their leaves, and as unseen partnerships sustain them beneath the surface, orchids continue their ancient journey with a calm persistence that feels almost timeless. Their story unfolds gradually, inviting the mind to slow alongside them, to appreciate the quiet complexity of living things, and to drift a little deeper into the peaceful science hidden within the natural world. As researchers continued exploring the biology of orchids, they began to uncover something even more remarkable than the flowers themselves. The entire life cycle of an orchid is shaped by an extraordinary balance between independence and cooperation. From the moment an orchid seed settles onto bark, moss, or soil, it enters a world filled with invisible relationships. The microscopic fungi that nourish young orchid seeds often remain associated with the plant for many years, continuing to exchange nutrients beneath the surface. In some orchid species, this relationship becomes so important that the plant depends on the fungus throughout its entire life. A few rare orchids have even abandoned photosynthesis almost completely, obtaining much of their nourishment through these underground fungal networks. They spend most of their existence hidden among leaf litter in shaded forests, producing flowers only occasionally. Such orchids remind scientists that nature does not always follow the patterns we expect. Even among flowering plants, there are quiet exceptions, subtle adaptations that reveal how flexible life can become when given enough time to evolve. The more carefully scientists study orchids, the more they discover that survival is often built upon partnerships so delicate and complex that they remain invisible unless we pause long enough to notice them. This hidden world beneath the forest floor is sometimes compared to an underground web of communication. Fungi spread through soil in fine thread-like structures called hyphae, creating networks that connect roots with nutrients scattered across the environment. Orchids interact with these networks in sophisticated ways, receiving minerals, water, and energy during important stages of their growth. The exchange is not always one-sided. Mature orchids that photosynthesize efficiently may provide carbohydrates back to their fungal partners, forming relationships based on mutual benefit. Scientists continue to investigate the details of these interactions, and many questions remain unanswered. Yet there is a quiet beauty in knowing that beneath forests, beyond what our eyes can easily observe, countless organisms cooperate continuously, sharing resources and supporting one another in subtle ways. The orchid, so admired for its visible elegance, is equally remarkable for these unseen connections that sustain its life year after year. The diversity of orchid flowers also reflects an endless series of evolutionary experiments. Some flowers are brilliantly colored, displaying shades of purple, white, pink, yellow, and green. Others appear almost translucent, their petals thin enough for light to pass softly through them. There are orchids whose flowers remain open for several months, while others bloom only briefly before fading. Scientists believe that many of these variations evolved because different pollinators respond to different visual signals. Bees often see colors differently from humans, detecting ultraviolet patterns invisible to our eyes. Certain orchid petals contain markings that act like guides, directing insects precisely toward pollen-bearing structures. To a bee, what appears to us as a simple flower may resemble a carefully designed landing map illuminated with hidden signals. These intricate relationships have evolved gradually through natural selection, each small advantage accumulating across generations until flower and pollinator become exquisitely adapted to one another. Among the most fascinating orchids are those that bloom at night. While many flowers depend on daytime visitors, nocturnal orchids rely on moths and other creatures that emerge after sunset. Their flowers are often pale in color, reflecting moonlight softly through darkness. Some produce fragrances that intensify only during the evening hours, filling the air with scents that travel surprisingly far in still night air. Researchers have identified complex mixtures of aromatic compounds responsible for these fragrances, each blend tailored to attract particular pollinators. It is remarkable to imagine a quiet tropical forest after dusk, where unseen moths drift silently between flowers, guided not by sight alone, but by delicate traces of fragrance suspended in the cool evening air. Orchids participate in this nighttime world with extraordinary precision, opening their flowers and releasing their scents according to rhythms shaped by evolution over millions of years. The timing of orchid flowering is itself a finely regulated process. Inside the plant, hormones coordinate growth and development in response to environmental signals such as temperature, daylight, and moisture. Specialized genes become active at particular moments, triggering the transformation from leaf growth to flower production. This process may take weeks or even months to unfold fully. A flower spike emerges gradually, extending upward with quiet determination. Buds form slowly along the stem, protected by delicate coverings as they develop. Then, often with little warning, the flowers begin to open one by one. Each bloom represents the culmination of countless cellular activities occurring in perfect coordination. Proteins have folded into precise shapes, pigments have accumulated in petals, and reproductive structures have matured, all according to biological instructions refined through ages of evolution. What appears simple from a distance is, in truth, an extraordinary orchestration of life unfolding at its own unhurried pace. This slow and deliberate rhythm is perhaps one of the reasons orchids have become symbols of patience in many cultures around the world. They do not rush their growth. They do not flower continuously in pursuit of constant display. Instead, they invest energy carefully, waiting for favorable conditions before revealing their blossoms. Scientists often emphasize that this strategy is not passive, it is an active form of adaptation, allowing orchids to conserve resources and maximize their chances of successful reproduction. Their patience is biological wisdom expressed through growth patterns shaped by millions of years of experience. In an age where so much seems immediate and fast-moving, orchids quietly remind us that complexity often develops slowly, through steady progress that may remain invisible until the right moment arrives. Even after their flowers fade, orchids continue their quiet work. Leaves capture sunlight, roots absorb moisture, and energy accumulates gradually for future seasons. The cycle repeats with gentle consistency, guided by environmental cues and ancient genetic programs that have endured across geological ages. Long before humans cultivated orchids in homes and gardens, these plants were already thriving in forests, mountains, and grasslands across the globe, adapting to changing climates and shifting landscapes with remarkable resilience. And as night grows deeper and thoughts become softer, it is comforting to imagine orchids continuing this patient journey in distant places, their roots anchored securely, their leaves gathering faint light, and their hidden partnerships quietly sustaining them. Their story does not hurry toward an ending. Instead, it unfolds slowly, season after season, flower after flower, carrying forward one of nature's most peaceful lessons, that lasting beauty often grows quietly, supported by unseen connections and guided by rhythms far older than ourselves. Over long stretches of Earth's history, orchids have quietly witnessed enormous changes in the world around them. Continents shifted gradually across the planet's surface, mountains rose slowly from ancient collisions, climates warmed and cooled, and forests expanded and retreated many times. Through all of these transformations, orchids adapted with remarkable flexibility. Scientists studying fossil evidence and genetic relationships believe that the ancestors of modern orchids were already diversifying while many familiar ecosystems were still taking shape. Rather than remaining confined to a single environment, orchids spread into tropical rainforests, temperate woodlands, grasslands, wetlands, and even semi-arid regions. This ability to occupy such varied habitats is one of the reasons orchids have become one of the largest families of flowering plants on Earth. Yet despite their vast diversity, they continue to share certain quiet qualities. patience, efficiency, and an extraordinary sensitivity to the environments they inhabit. Their success has not come through dominance or speed, but through countless small adjustments repeated across millions of years, allowing each species to find its own place within the intricate patterns of the natural world. One particularly fascinating aspect of orchid biology is the way these plants manage energy. Because many orchids grow in environments where resources fluctuate, they have evolved strategies that favor conservation over rapid growth. Some species produce thick leaves that store water and nutrients for future use. Others enter periods of slower activity during unfavorable seasons, reducing growth while waiting for conditions to improve. This process is not unlike the quiet resting cycles seen throughout nature. Trees shed leaves in autumn, animals hibernate during winter, and orchids too possess rhythms that balance activity with stillness. Scientists refer to these patterns as seasonal adaptations, and they are regulated by complex interactions between environmental signals and plant hormones. Temperature changes, rainfall patterns, and day length all influence how an orchid allocates its resources. Rather than responding impulsively to every fluctuation, the plant integrates information gradually, adjusting its growth with remarkable steadiness. There is something deeply reassuring in this measured response, where survival depends not on constant motion, but on thoughtful pacing shaped by long experience. The colors of orchid flowers also reveal fascinating scientific stories. While humans often admire orchids for their beauty, pigments evolved primarily to serve biological functions. Anthocyanins create shades of purple, pink, and red, while carotenoids contribute yellows and oranges. The distribution of these pigments within petals can produce striking patterns that guide pollinators toward nectar or pollen, yet color perception varies greatly among different animals. Bees, for example, are sensitive to ultraviolet light, a range of wavelength invisible to human eyes. Many orchid flowers display ultraviolet markings that function almost like hidden pathways, visible only to their intended visitors. Researchers using specialized photography have revealed these secret patterns, showing that what appears to us as a simple flower may actually contain elaborate visual signals designed for specific pollinators. This hidden dimension of orchid beauty reminds us that the natural world often contains layers of complexity beyond ordinary perception, waiting quietly to be discovered through careful observation and scientific curiosity. Fragrance provides another remarkable example of orchid sophistication. Some orchids produce only faint scents, noticeable only at close range. Others release powerful fragrances that can fill entire gardens or drift across forests at night. The chemistry behind these scents is extraordinarily complex. A single orchid flower may produce dozens of volatile compounds, each contributing subtle notes that combine into a unique fragrance profile. Certain compounds resemble the aromas of vanilla, citrus, cinnamon, or honey, while others imitate the scent of fermenting fruit or specific insects. Scientists analyzing orchid fragrances have found that even slight changes in chemical composition can alter pollinator behavior dramatically. This precision allows orchids to attract preferred visitors while reducing competition with neighboring plants. In essence, each fragrance becomes a carefully crafted message carried invisibly through the air, inviting certain species while quietly excluding others. It is a form of communication both ancient and elegant, refined over evolutionary timescales so vast that individual generations pass almost unnoticed within the larger story. As orchids spread across different regions of the world, they also developed astonishing variations in size. Some miniature orchids produce flowers only a few millimeters wide, so small that they can rest comfortably on a fingertip. Others grow into impressive specimens with large blossoms arranged along tall stems. The range of forms reflects the diverse ecological niches orchids occupy. Tiny orchids may thrive in moss-covered forests where space is limited, while larger species flourish in open habitats with abundant light and moisture. Despite these differences, the underlying biological principles remain remarkably consistent. Growth depends on the same cellular processes, the same genetic instructions, and the same careful balance between resource acquisition and conservation. This continuity beneath diversity is one of the most beautiful themes in biology. Life explores countless possibilities, yet maintains fundamental connections that unite seemingly different organisms across vast distances and long periods of time. The relationship between orchids and humans has also evolved gradually. For centuries, people cultivated orchids not only for their flowers but for the quiet fascination they inspire. Early botanists often undertook long journeys to remote regions in search of unusual species, documenting their forms with meticulous illustrations and observations. Modern science has continued this tradition of careful study, using genetics, microscopy, and ecological research to understand orchids more deeply. Yet even with advanced technology, orchids retain many mysteries. Scientists continue investigating how certain species interact with fungi, how flower shapes evolve, and how orchids may respond to changing climates in the future. These unanswered questions are not frustrating. Instead, they remind us that nature remains wonderfully complex, always offering new discoveries to those willing to observe patiently. And perhaps patience is the quiet thread connecting every part of the orchid's story. From seeds smaller than grains of dust to flowers that may take years to appear, orchids reveal a world where growth unfolds gradually, and success is measured not in speed, but in resilience. They live according to rhythms shaped by sunlight, rainfall, seasons, and hidden partnerships beneath the soil. Their beauty is not hurried, their survival is not accidental. It is the result of countless generations adapting gently to changing conditions, while preserving a remarkable harmony with the living world around them. As these thoughts drift softly onward, one can almost imagine orchids continuing their silent existence across forests, mountains, and distant islands, growing quietly beneath stars, responding to rain, unfolding petals with patient grace, and carrying forward their ancient story into another season of calm and enduring life. In many ways, orchids invite us to think differently about time itself. Human lives are often measured by days, months, and years, yet orchids exist within rhythms that stretch comfortably beyond immediate moments. A seed may wait patiently for the right fungal partner before beginning to grow. A young plant may spend several years developing roots and leaves before producing its first bloom. Some orchids flower only during a brief season each year, while others wait even longer, conserving their energy until conditions become just right. This measured pace is not a sign of hesitation. Rather, it reflects a biological strategy shaped by immense spans of evolutionary history, where success depends not on haste but on timing. Scientists studying plant development often describe such strategies as finely tuned responses to environmental signals. Orchids sense changes in temperature, humidity, daylight, and moisture, integrating this information gradually through networks of hormones and genes. Their growth is steady rather than hurried, and because of this, every stage of their lives unfolds with an almost quiet certainty, as if the plant understands that nature rarely asks anything to bloom before its proper season arrives. This sensitivity to timing becomes especially visible in orchids that inhabit regions with distinct seasonal cycles. In temperate forests, where winters are cool and summers are warm, orchids often enter periods of dormancy. During these quieter months, the visible parts of the plant may shrink or disappear altogether, while hidden structures beneath the soil remain alive and prepared for future growth. Scientists have discovered that even during dormancy, important biological processes continue. Cells repair themselves, nutrients are stored, and chemical signals maintain readiness for the coming season. Though outwardly still, the orchid remains quietly active within. This pattern is common throughout the natural world. Periods of apparent inactivity often conceal intricate forms of preparation, where energy is gathered patiently before growth resumes. Observing orchids teaches us that stillness and progress are not opposites. Sometimes the most important transformations occur slowly and invisibly, hidden beneath the surface until the moment is right for them to emerge. Among the most enchanting orchid habitats are tropical rainforests, where humidity remains high and temperatures change only gently throughout the year. Here, orchids live suspended on branches high above the forest floor, surrounded by layers of leaves, mosses, and other epiphytic plants. Rain falls frequently, though often in soft bursts rather than continuous downpours. Water trickles along bark, gathers in crevices, and evaporates gradually into the humid air. Orchids have adapted beautifully to these conditions. Their aerial roots extend outward in search of moisture, while their leaves capture filtered sunlight passing through the canopy above. In these elevated gardens, orchids coexist with countless other organisms, including insects, frogs, birds, and microscopic communities invisible to the naked eye. Each species contributes to the broader ecosystem in subtle ways, participating in cycles of energy and nutrient exchange that have persisted for ages. Scientists studying rainforest ecology often emphasize the importance of these interconnected relationships, where no organism exists entirely alone. Orchids, with their reliance on pollinators, fungi, and surrounding habitats, offer one of the clearest examples of how deeply life is woven together. Even the architecture of an orchid flower reflects this sense of interconnectedness. The symmetry of many orchid blooms is not merely decorative. It serves practical purposes, guiding pollinators with remarkable efficiency. Some flowers possess shapes so specialized that only a particular insect can access their pollen. In certain cases, the length of a flower's nectar tube matches precisely the feeding structures of its preferred pollinator. This phenomenon fascinated naturalists for centuries because it demonstrated how closely species can evolve together. Over generations, flowers and pollinators influence one another's development, each adapting gradually in response to the other. Scientists call this coevolution. And orchids provide some of the most elegant examples known in biology. Their flowers are not isolated creations. They are products of long relationships, shaped by countless interactions repeated across immense spans of time. Each petal, fragrance, and curve tells part of this shared evolutionary story. There are orchids whose flowers resemble tiny birds poised in flight, others that look like dancing figures, and still others that mimic spiders, bees, or delicate slippers. These forms often inspire wonder. Yet from a scientific perspective, they reveal the creative power of natural selection. Small genetic variations accumulate gradually, and traits that improve pollination become more common over generations. What begins as a slight change in petal shape may eventually give rise to entirely new floral structures. Evolution does not work according to a predetermined design. Instead, it proceeds through countless small experiments, preserving those that prove successful within particular environments. Orchids, with their astonishing diversity of forms, stand as living records of this process. Each species represents a unique solution to the challenges of survival, reproduction, and adaptation, refined patiently over evolutionary timescales that stretch far beyond ordinary human experience. And yet, despite all this diversity, orchids maintain a quiet consistency in the way they approach life. They conserve resources carefully. They form partnerships when cooperation offers advantages. They respond sensitively to environmental changes without abandoning their essential rhythms. Their existence is marked by patience rather than urgency, by adaptation rather than force. Scientists may describe these patterns through ecology, genetics, and evolutionary theory, but there is also something gently reassuring about them on a more personal level. Orchids remind us that growth can be slow and still meaningful, that preparation may take time, and that enduring beauty often emerges through steady processes unfolding quietly in the background. As night continues its calm passage and thoughts grow softer, it is pleasant to imagine orchids scattered across the world, growing in misty mountains, shaded forests, and distant tropical canopies. Their roots remain anchored, their leaves gather gentle light, and their flowers wait patiently for the seasons that will invite them to bloom once more. Without hurry, without noise, they continue their ancient journey, carrying forward one of nature's most peaceful expressions of resilience, harmony, and quiet grace. As botanists spend years observing orchids in their natural habitats, many come away with a quiet appreciation for how these plants balance fragility with resilience. An orchid flower may appear delicate enough to be disturbed by the gentlest movement of air, yet the plant that produces it is often remarkably enduring. Some orchid species survive long periods of drought by slowing their growth and drawing upon carefully stored reserves. Others endure cool mountain nights, heavy seasonal rains, or changing forest conditions that would challenge less adaptable plants. Their resilience does not come from rigid strength. Instead, it arises from flexibility, from the ability to respond gradually to changing circumstances while preserving the essential patterns that sustain life. Scientists frequently observe that organisms capable of adapting quietly over time often persist longer than those relying solely on rapid growth or competition. Orchids exemplify this principle beautifully, thriving through patience, efficiency, and a deep responsiveness to the world around them. This adaptability is particularly evident in the ways orchids reproduce. While their flowers capture much of our attention, the creation of seeds is an equally extraordinary process. After successful pollination, an orchid flower gradually shifts its energy away from attracting visitors and toward developing a seed capsule. Inside this capsule, countless tiny seeds begin to form. Unlike the large seeds of many flowering plants, orchid seeds remain astonishingly small and lightweight. They contain almost no nutritional reserves, allowing the plant to produce enormous numbers of them. When the capsule eventually opens, these seeds drift into the air like fine dust carried by gentle currents of wind. Most will never germinate, and yet this strategy has proven remarkably successful across evolutionary history. By producing vast numbers of seeds and dispersing them widely, orchids increase the likelihood that a few will land in places where the necessary conditions for growth exist. It is a quiet form of optimism written into biology itself, where countless possibilities are released into the world without certainty, trusting that some will find fertile beginnings. The journey of an orchid seed is among the most delicate stages in the plant's life. Because the seed contains so few resources, it cannot simply sprout and grow independently. Instead, it must encounter compatible fungi in its environment, organisms capable of supplying essential nutrients during early development. This dependency creates a fascinating ecological partnership. Scientists studying orchid ecology have discovered that different orchid species often associate with specific groups of fungi, forming relationships that may persist for years or even decades. The fungus extends fine threads through soil or organic matter, gathering nutrients and sharing them with the developing orchid. In return, mature orchids may provide carbohydrates produced through photosynthesis. These exchanges occur silently and invisibly beneath forests and grasslands across the globe. They remind us that many of nature's most important relationships are hidden from view, quietly sustaining life through cooperation rather than competition alone. As orchid seedlings mature, their growth remains measured and deliberate. Leaves unfold gradually, roots extend carefully, and energy is stored for future development. Scientists have noted that orchids invest considerable resources in building strong foundations before committing to reproduction. This strategy contrasts with plants that grow quickly and flower early. Orchids seem content to wait, allowing structures to strengthen over time. There is an elegance to this patience. The plant does not rush toward its next stage. Instead, it moves steadily, responding to environmental conditions while maintaining a pace that has served its ancestors for millions of years. In forests where seasons pass quietly overhead, orchids continue this slow work year after year, often unnoticed except when their flowers finally emerge in moments of striking beauty. Modern research has revealed that orchids also possess surprisingly sophisticated internal communication systems. Plant hormones such as auxins, cytokinins, and gibberellins regulate growth, coordinating activities between roots, leaves, and flowers. Chemical signals travel throughout the plant, helping it respond to changes in light, water availability, and temperature. If conditions become unfavorable, growth may slow temporarily. When moisture returns or temperatures improve, development resumes. These adjustments occur through countless biochemical interactions taking place continuously within the plant's tissues. Though orchids lack nervous systems or brains, their ability to perceive and respond to their environment remains remarkably refined. Scientists increasingly describe plants as dynamic organisms capable of complex forms of environmental sensing, and orchids offer beautiful examples of this quiet intelligence expressed through growth and adaptation. The longevity of some orchids adds another dimension to their story. Certain species can live for decades under favorable conditions, returning year after year with renewed growth and flowering. Individual plants may witness many cycles of seasons, adapting gradually as their environments change. In botanical gardens around the world, some cultivated orchids have been cared for across generations, blooming repeatedly while outliving the people who first tended them. This continuity creates a gentle sense of connection between past and present. The orchid that opens its flowers today may carry genetic instructions shaped by countless ancestors, stretching back through ages long before human history. Within each bloom resides a story of persistence written across millions of years of evolution, preserved quietly within living cells and expressed anew with every season. As these reflections settle softly into the evening, orchids begin to seem less like isolated flowers and more like patient companions within the broader story of life on Earth. They teach through example rather than words, showing how growth can be steady without haste, how resilience can coexist with delicacy, and how unseen relationships often provide the strongest foundations for enduring success. Their roots explore quietly, their leaves gather light with quiet efficiency, and their flowers appear not as sudden miracles, but as the natural expression of long preparation and careful adaptation. And somewhere tonight, in rainforests touched by warm mist, on cool mountain slopes wrapped in clouds, and in quiet forests where moonlight filters gently through leaves, orchids continue their ancient rhythms. They wait, they grow, they flower, and they rest again, moving through time with calm certainty, carrying forward a story of patience and quiet beauty that seems to belong as much to the peaceful hours of night as it does to the living world itself. There is something quietly comforting about the fact that orchids have never needed to hurry. Their story stretches across immense periods of time, and throughout that story, success has come through small, consistent changes rather than sudden transformations. Scientists studying evolutionary biology often emphasize that most adaptations arise gradually, through countless generations shaped by environmental pressures so subtle that no single moment appears extraordinary. Orchids embody this principle with remarkable grace. A slightly more efficient root system, a flower shape that better attracts a particular pollinator, or a leaf that conserves moisture a little more effectively may seem like modest advantages, yet repeated across millions of years, these small improvements accumulate into astonishing diversity. Today, orchids inhabit nearly every continent except Antarctica, flourishing in habitats as varied as tropical jungles, temperate meadows, cloud forests, rocky outcrops, and coastal regions. Their quiet persistence reminds us that enduring success in nature is often built slowly, through steady adaptation that unfolds almost imperceptibly over time. Among the most fascinating orchid environments are cloud forests, ecosystems suspended between earth and sky, along mountain slopes where moist air rises and condenses into drifting mist. These forests are often wrapped in clouds for much of the day, creating conditions unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. The air remains cool and humid, sunlight filters softly through layers of foliage, and moisture coats branches, mosses, and leaves in a fine veil of water droplets. Orchids have become masters of this environment. Many species cling to tree trunks covered in moss, their roots extending outward to absorb moisture directly from the surrounding air. Unlike plants that depend heavily on soil, these orchids derive much of what they need from rain, mist, and decaying organic material that accumulates around them. Scientists refer to such species as epiphytes, and they represent one of the most successful growth strategies within the orchid family. Their lives unfold gently among the branches, where clouds drift quietly through the forest and every surface seems touched by moisture and stillness. The ability of orchids to capture water from the air is made possible by the remarkable structure of their roots. The velamen, the spongy outer layer covering many orchid roots, acts almost like a natural sponge. When rain or mist arrives, this tissue absorbs water rapidly, storing it temporarily before transferring it deeper into the root. During dry periods, the velamen also helps reduce water loss and protects delicate inner tissues from environmental stress. Under close examination, Scientists have found that the cells of the velamen are intricately arranged, creating tiny spaces where moisture can be held efficiently. This elegant design allows orchids to survive in habitats where water availability changes constantly. The roots themselves often become visible along branches and tree trunks, twisting gently through moss and bark in search of favorable conditions. Far from being hidden underground, these roots participate actively in the orchid's relationship with its environment, absorbing water, exchanging gases, and anchoring the plant securely in place. Light, too, shapes orchid life in subtle and fascinating ways. In dense forests, sunlight rarely reaches plants directly. Instead, it filters through layers of leaves, creating shifting patterns of brightness and shadow throughout the day. Orchids, adapted to these conditions, have evolved leaves capable of capturing low levels of light efficiently. Their chloroplasts, the structures responsible for photosynthesis, are often arranged to maximize energy production under shaded conditions. Some orchids can even adjust their physiology according to changing light availability, modifying how they use energy as seasons progress or neighboring vegetation grows. This flexibility allows them to thrive in environments where light is unpredictable and constantly changing. Scientists studying photosynthesis often describe orchids as highly efficient managers of energy, carefully balancing growth with conservation. Their approach is patient and measured, avoiding unnecessary expenditure while remaining prepared to take advantage of favorable conditions whenever they arise. Orchid flowers themselves are masterpieces of biological engineering. Every petal, sepal, and reproductive structure contributes to the plant's ability to reproduce successfully. In many species, pollen is packaged into compact masses called polonia, rather than released as loose grains. This arrangement allows pollinators to transfer large quantities of pollen efficiently from one flower to another. Specialized sticky structures ensure that the polonia attach securely to visiting insects, birds, or other pollinators. Scientists have documented extraordinary examples of this process, where orchids position their pollen with astonishing precision, placing it exactly where it will most likely contact the next flower. These intricate mechanisms evolved gradually through natural selection, shaped by countless interactions between flowers and their pollinators. The result is a reproductive system of remarkable elegance, where form and function blend seamlessly in service of life's continuation. Yet despite all the complexity hidden within their biology, orchids never seem hurried. Their flowers may remain open for weeks or even months, inviting pollinators with quiet persistence rather than urgency. Their roots grow steadily, exploring their surroundings with patience. Their leaves gather sunlight softly, converting energy with quiet efficiency. Every aspect of their existence reflects rhythms shaped by balance and adaptation rather than speed. Perhaps this is why orchids evoke such a sense of calm in those who study them. They offer a living example of how intricate processes can unfold gently, without haste, and still create extraordinary outcomes. As the night deepens and the mind wanders softly through these quiet scientific wonders, it becomes easy to imagine orchids continuing their ancient lives far beyond the reach of human attention. High in mist-covered forests, along shaded mountain paths, and among rain-soaked tropical branches, they remain patient observers of passing seasons. Their roots cling securely, their leaves gather faint light, and their flowers open according to rhythms refined across ages. Without hurry and without noise, they continue growing as they always have, carrying forward one of nature's gentlest lessons, that beauty, resilience, and lasting harmony often emerge not through rushing toward change, but through moving steadily and peacefully with the quiet flow of time. The longer scientists observe orchids, the more they discover that these plants exist in a delicate balance between stability and change. An orchid may spend many years rooted in the same place, attached to a familiar branch, or nestled among the same moss-covered stones, and yet every season brings subtle adjustments. A shift in rainfall may influence the timing of flowering. Slight differences in temperature may alter growth patterns. A change in surrounding vegetation can affect the amount of sunlight reaching the leaves. Orchids respond to these variations not through sudden reactions, but through gradual adjustments carefully regulated by their biology. Their tissues monitor moisture levels, their cells respond to chemical signals, and their growth adapts gently to new conditions. Scientists call this process phenotypic plasticity, the ability of an organism to modify aspects of its behavior or form in response to its environment. Orchids provide beautiful examples of this flexibility, showing how life can remain rooted while still responding gracefully to change. This quiet adaptability becomes especially important as environments shift over long periods of time. Throughout Earth's history, climates have fluctuated repeatedly. Forests have expanded and contracted, temperatures have risen and fallen, and landscapes have transformed in ways impossible to observe within a single lifetime. Yet orchids have endured through many of these changes by evolving gradually alongside their surroundings. Genetic diversity plays an important role in this resilience. Within orchid populations, natural variations in traits such as drought tolerance, flowering time, and temperature sensitivity provide opportunities for adaptation across generations. Scientists studying orchid genetics often describe evolution as a vast, ongoing experiment, where small differences are tested continuously by environmental conditions. Those variations that improve survival tend to persist, becoming part of the species' biological inheritance. Over immense periods of time, these small shifts accumulate, allowing orchids to diversify into the thousands of species we know today. Some orchids have become masters of extreme environments. In certain mountain regions, orchids grow at elevations where temperatures fall close to freezing during the night. Their cells contain protective compounds that help prevent damage from cold conditions, while their growth cycles are carefully synchronized with short growing seasons. In warmer climates, other orchids have evolved mechanisms to tolerate intense heat and intermittent drought. Thick leaves reduce water loss, and specialized photosynthetic pathways allow efficient energy production while conserving moisture. Scientists refer to one of these strategies as CAM photosynthesis, a remarkable adaptation used by many orchids and other succulent plants. Rather than opening their stomata, the tiny pores on leaves, during the heat of the day, these orchids open them at night when temperatures are cooler and humidity is higher. Carbon dioxide is absorbed during the evening and stored for use during daylight hours. This process minimizes water loss and allows orchids to thrive in conditions that might otherwise be too dry. It is another example of how patiently nature refines solutions to environmental challenges, shaping organisms that live in harmony with the rhythms of their surroundings. The flowers of orchids continue to inspire scientific curiosity because of their extraordinary variation in form. Some species produce blossoms that are perfectly symmetrical, while others display unusual twists and asymmetrical shapes. In many orchids, the flower rotates during development through a process known as resupination, causing the lip of the flower to settle into a lower position that serves as a landing platform for pollinators. This seemingly simple movement is controlled by intricate developmental processes unfolding within the flower bud long before it opens. Researchers studying flower development have identified genes that regulate these transformations, revealing how subtle changes in gene activity can create striking differences in floral architecture. The diversity that results is astonishing. Across the orchid family, flowers range from tiny, nearly invisible blooms to spectacular displays measuring many inches across. Yet beneath this variety lies a shared developmental blueprint connecting all orchids through their ancient evolutionary history. Fragrance remains one of the most enchanting aspects of orchid biology. Scientists using advanced chemical analysis have identified hundreds of compounds involved in orchid scents, each contributing delicate notes that attract specific pollinators. Some fragrances are sweet and familiar to human senses, evoking vanilla, honey, or citrus. Others are unusual, mimicking the odors of mushrooms, fermenting fruit, or even particular insects. These scents are not produced randomly. Specialized cells within the flower synthesize aromatic compounds according to genetic instructions and environmental cues. The timing of fragrance release may vary throughout the day, synchronized with the activity patterns of target pollinators. Night-blooming orchids often become most fragrant after sunset, when moths begin their silent journeys through forests and gardens. This invisible exchange of chemical signals creates a hidden layer of communication that surrounds orchids continuously, filling the air with messages carried softly on moving currents. Even after centuries of study, orchids continue to surprise researchers. New species are discovered regularly in remote forests and mountainous regions around the world. Advances in genetics reveal previously unknown relationships between species, while ecological studies uncover increasingly complex interactions with fungi, insects, and surrounding ecosystems. Each discovery adds another chapter to the orchid's long scientific story, yet many mysteries remain. How certain orchids evolved their extraordinary flower shapes, how they may respond to future environmental changes, and how their hidden partnerships operate in detail are questions that scientists continue to explore with quiet fascination. And perhaps it is fitting that orchids retain some of their mysteries. They remind us that the natural world is not a puzzle to be solved completely, but a living system rich with complexity and wonder. Their roots extend into unseen networks beneath forests. Their flowers open according to ancient rhythms, and their lives unfold at a pace that invites patience rather than urgency. As these thoughts settle gently into the quiet hours of night, orchids continue their slow and graceful existence across the world, blooming when conditions are right, resting when seasons change, and carrying forward a story of resilience, beauty, and quiet adaptation that has endured for millions of peaceful years. There is a quiet elegance in the way orchids occupy space within the natural world. They rarely dominate landscapes in the way vast forests or sweeping grasslands do. Instead, they appear in smaller, more intimate settings, nestled among mosses, perched on branches, hidden beneath ferns, or growing quietly in the shelter of rocks and fallen leaves. To find an orchid in the wild often requires patience and careful attention. Botanists who spend years studying these plants frequently describe the experience not as a search for something rare, but as learning to notice what has been quietly present all along. Orchids do not announce themselves with urgency. They exist comfortably within the rhythms of their environments, flourishing in places where conditions align with their needs. This modest presence is one reason they inspire such lasting fascination. Their beauty feels discovered rather than displayed, revealed gradually to those who slow down enough to observe the delicate details of petals, roots, and leaves shaped by countless generations of adaptation. Many orchids live lives closely connected to the movement of water through ecosystems. In tropical forests, rainfall arrives in cycles that influence nearly every aspect of plant growth. Moisture collects on leaves high in the canopy and drips slowly downward through layers of vegetation, nourishing mosses, ferns, and orchids along the way. Epiphytic orchids, those growing upon trees, have become remarkably skilled at capturing these fleeting opportunities. Their roots spread across bark surfaces where droplets linger, absorbing water efficiently before it evaporates. Some species also collect tiny particles of organic matter that accumulate around their roots, creating miniature ecosystems filled with microorganisms and nutrients. Scientists studying canopy ecology have found that these elevated communities support surprising biodiversity. Orchids participate actively in these environments, contributing to ecological networks that recycle nutrients and provide habitats for insects and microscopic life. Far above the forest floor, entire worlds exist quietly among branches, shaped by moisture, sunlight, and the gentle persistence of living things adapting together. The leaves of orchids reveal another layer of quiet sophistication. While flowers often receive the most attention, leaves perform the essential work of capturing light and producing energy through photosynthesis. Their shapes vary widely depending on habitat. Orchids growing in shaded forests may develop broad, thin leaves optimized for gathering limited sunlight, while species exposed to brighter conditions often produce thicker leaves with protective coatings that reduce water loss. Inside these leaves, chloroplasts convert light into chemical energy through processes that scientists have studied for generations. Yet even today, photosynthesis remains one of the most remarkable transformations in biology, allowing plants to capture energy arriving from the sun and store it in forms that sustain not only themselves, but entire ecosystems. Orchids carry out this work quietly and continuously, transforming light into life with an efficiency refined over immense spans of evolutionary time. As evening deepens and the world becomes quieter, it is pleasant to imagine the many places where orchids continue these processes unnoticed. In mountain forests wrapped in mist, leaves gather faint morning light. In tropical canopies, roots absorb moisture left behind by passing clouds. In shaded valleys, seedlings establish partnerships with fungi hidden beneath the soil. These activities unfold slowly and without spectacle, yet they sustain one of the most diverse families of flowering plants on Earth. Scientists sometimes describe ecosystems as webs of relationships, where each organism influences countless others through exchanges of energy, nutrients, and information. Orchids exemplify this interconnectedness beautifully. Their lives depend upon fungi, pollinators, climate, and habitat, while their flowers nourish insects and contribute to the continuity of ecological communities that have evolved together over millions of years. One of the most fascinating aspects of orchids is how their diversity continues to expand our understanding of evolution itself. Researchers comparing DNA from different orchid species have uncovered complex patterns of relatedness that reveal ancient migrations and branching lineages stretching back tens of millions of years. These studies show that orchids diversified repeatedly as they encountered new environments, evolving unique characteristics suited to different ecological niches. Some lineages specialized in life high above the ground, while others adapted to terrestrial habitats or developed unusual relationships with specific pollinators. The evolutionary tree of orchids resembles a vast branching structure filled with countless experiments in form, fragrance, and survival. Yet despite this extraordinary diversity, certain traits persist throughout the family, linking all orchids through shared ancestry. Their flowers retain recognizable patterns of organization. Their seeds remain exceptionally small, and their dependence on fungal partners continues to shape early development. These enduring connections provide gentle reminders that diversity and unity often coexist throughout the living world. Scientists also marvel at the longevity of orchid lineages. While individual plants may live for years or decades, the broader evolutionary story of orchids extends across geological eras. Entire mountain ranges have risen and eroded during the time orchids have existed. Ice ages have come and gone. Forests have shifted across continents as climates changed. Through all of these transformations, orchids have adapted patiently, preserving their place within Earth's ecosystems through flexibility rather than resistance. Their history illustrates a profound biological truth. Survival often depends less on strength than on the ability to respond thoughtfully to changing conditions. Orchids do not attempt to control their environments. Instead, they listen carefully to temperature, moisture, light, and seasonal rhythms, adjusting their growth in harmony with the world around them. Perhaps this is one reason orchids feel so peaceful to contemplate during quiet hours. Their story is not driven by haste or struggle. It is shaped by patience, cooperation, and gentle adaptation. Their flowers bloom when conditions are favorable. Their roots explore slowly and steadily. Their leaves gather light without urgency, trusting the steady return of day after night. Across forests, mountains, islands, and valleys, orchids continue their ancient journey with calm persistence, reminding us that life's most enduring achievements often arise gradually, through countless small moments of growth unfolding quietly over time. And somewhere tonight, beneath drifting clouds or among softly rustling leaves, orchids continue this peaceful rhythm exactly as they have for ages, growing slowly, flowering gracefully, and carrying forward one of nature's quietest and most beautiful stories into another gentle and unhurried season. As the story of orchids continues to unfold, it becomes clear that their greatest achievements are often the least visible. A flower may capture attention for a few weeks, yet behind that brief display lies years of careful preparation. Roots have explored their surroundings, gathering moisture and nutrients with quiet persistence. Leaves have absorbed sunlight season after season, storing energy patiently. Hidden fungal partners have exchanged nutrients beneath bark or soil, sustaining growth in ways that remain unseen by most observers. Every bloom, no matter how delicate or fleeting, represents the outcome of countless interactions unfolding slowly across time. Scientists often emphasize that biological success is rarely the result of a single event. Instead, it emerges through networks of relationships and long histories of adaptation. Orchids embody this principle beautifully. Their flowers are not isolated wonders, but expressions of entire ecosystems working together in quiet harmony, where even the smallest organisms contribute to the continuity of life. This perspective has influenced how modern ecologists understand forests and natural habitats more broadly. Rather than viewing plants as separate individuals competing endlessly for resources, researchers increasingly describe ecosystems as communities built upon intricate cooperation as well as competition. Orchids provide elegant examples of this interconnectedness. Their seeds depend on fungi. Their flowers rely on pollinators. Their roots interact with microorganisms. Their survival often depends on stable habitats maintained by countless other species. Even the trees that support epiphytic orchids play important roles by providing physical structures where orchids can establish themselves safely above the ground. None of these relationships exists in isolation. Each becomes part of a larger network that allows forests to function with remarkable resilience. When scientists map these interactions, they discover webs of connection so extensive that a single orchid may be linked, directly or indirectly, to dozens of other organisms throughout its life. The quiet complexity of these relationships invites reflection on the passage of time within nature. Orchids do not experience the world in hurried moments. Their rhythms are shaped by seasons, rainfall cycles, and gradual environmental changes unfolding over years. A seed may wait months or longer before conditions become suitable for germination. A young orchid may spend many years building strength before flowering for the first time. Even mature plants often bloom according to seasonal cues that repeat with gentle regularity year after year. Scientists studying plant phenology, the timing of biological events, have found that orchids are remarkably precise in responding to environmental signals. Changes in temperature, daylight, and moisture influence hormonal pathways that regulate flowering and growth. These processes are intricate, yet they operate with quiet consistency, allowing orchids to align their lives with the rhythms of the world around them. Some orchid species display astonishing longevity. Certain terrestrial orchids may return each year from underground structures, surviving seasonal hardships before sending up fresh leaves and flowers when conditions improve. Epiphytic orchids growing in stable environments can live for decades, expanding gradually as new roots and shoots emerge over time. In botanical collections, carefully tended orchids have been known to outlive generations of caretakers, flowering repeatedly while quietly continuing their patient existence. This longevity lends orchids a sense of continuity that feels almost timeless. The plant blooming today may carry genetic traits inherited through countless ancestors, preserving evolutionary solutions refined over millions of years. Its flowers may appear delicate and temporary, yet the lineage behind them stretches deep into Earth's history, connecting present moments with ancient beginnings. Researchers often speak of orchids with a special kind of affection because these plants reward careful observation. The longer one studies them, the more subtle details emerge. Tiny hairs on petals guide pollinators toward nectar. Specialized cells release fragrances at precisely the right times of day. Root structures adjust to changing moisture levels. Hidden fungal networks sustain growth beneath the surface. None of these processes seeks attention, yet together they create one of the most diverse and successful families of flowering plants on Earth. Orchids remind scientists that complexity does not always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it reveals itself quietly, through patient study and an appreciation for small details woven together over immense stretches of time. There is also something deeply calming about the orchid's relationship with uncertainty. Its tiny seeds drift into the world without guarantees, relying on chance encounters with suitable habitats and fungal partners. Most will never germinate, yet the species persists because life continues to create possibilities generously. Orchids do not invest all their hopes in a single outcome. They scatter countless opportunities into the environment, trusting that some will take root and grow. This strategy, refined by evolution, reflects a quiet resilience that feels both scientific and profoundly reassuring. Growth is not always predictable. Success may arrive slowly and unevenly, yet life continues exploring possibilities patiently, season after season, generation after generation. As the quiet hours deepen and thoughts begin to soften even further, orchids remain gentle companions for the imagination. One can picture them growing high in rainforest canopies where mist gathers at dawn, or nestled among mosses on cool mountain slopes where clouds drift silently through ancient forests. Their roots cling patiently, their leaves gather light with quiet efficiency, their flowers open when the time is right, and close again as seasons change. Nothing about their existence feels rushed. Every stage unfolds according to rhythms shaped by cooperation, adaptation, and enduring patience. And perhaps this is the most peaceful lesson orchids offer. Life does not always move quickly, nor does it need to. The most remarkable transformations may occur gradually, hidden within small moments repeated across long periods of time. Orchids have followed this gentle path for millions of years, growing steadily, adapting gracefully, and flourishing through quiet persistence. Even now, across forests, mountains, islands, and valleys around the world, they continue their ancient journey, blooming softly beneath changing skies and carrying forward a timeless story of resilience, harmony, and patient beauty into the calm embrace of another night. As the night grows quieter still, the world of orchids seems to slow even further, revealing details that are easy to overlook during busier hours. Imagine a single orchid resting on the branch of an old tree deep within a rainforest. The air is warm and heavy with moisture. Tiny droplets of water gather along the edges of its roots, glistening briefly before being absorbed into the plant's tissues. Above, layers of leaves soften the sunlight into shifting patterns of brightness and shade. Around it, insects move quietly through the forest. Fungi extend delicate networks through bark and moss, and countless living organisms continue their small, steady activities. The orchid is not separate from this world. It exists because of it, participating in an ancient web of relationships that has endured for millions of years. Scientists often describe ecosystems as communities of shared existence, where life depends not only on individual strength, but on countless exchanges occurring continuously and often invisibly. Orchids illustrate this beautifully, thriving not through isolation, but through connection. This idea of connection extends even to the chemistry within orchid cells. Every living cell inside an orchid contains intricate molecular systems performing countless tasks simultaneously. Enzymes guide chemical reactions with extraordinary precision. Mitochondria convert stored energy into forms the plant can use. Chloroplasts capture sunlight and transform it into sugars that fuel growth. DNA preserves instructions accumulated through ages of evolution, ensuring that roots develop properly, leaves unfold in the correct patterns, and flowers emerge with their remarkable forms. Scientists who study cellular biology often speak with quiet wonder about this microscopic world, where millions of molecules cooperate seamlessly within spaces too small for human eyes to see. Orchids, like all living things, are composed of these hidden systems working tirelessly and silently, maintaining life through elegant processes that continue day and night without pause. Yet despite all of this complexity, orchids live with remarkable simplicity. They do not strive to become anything other than what they are. Their roots grow where moisture can be found. Their leaves gather light when it is available. Their flowers bloom according to seasonal rhythms refined over immense periods of time. In many ways, orchids embody a principle that ecologists often observe throughout nature. Organisms flourish when they align themselves with their environments, rather than resisting them. Adaptation is not surrender. It is a quiet form of wisdom, allowing life to persist through changing conditions while preserving essential qualities. Orchids have practiced this wisdom for millions of years, responding gently to the world around them and finding opportunities for growth, even in environments that appear challenging or uncertain. The forests where many orchids live are themselves extraordinary places of balance. Water evaporates from leaves and rises into the atmosphere, later returning as rain. Fallen branches decay slowly, releasing nutrients back into the soil. Fungi decompose organic matter, insects pollinate flowers, and plants convert sunlight into energy that sustains entire ecosystems. Every process contributes to a larger cycle of renewal and continuity. Orchids participate in these cycles quietly and faithfully. Their seeds disperse on moving air currents, their roots form partnerships with fungi, and their flowers nourish pollinators that will carry life forward into future generations. Scientists sometimes refer to these processes as ecological cycles, yet there is something almost meditative about imagining them unfolding continuously across forests, mountains, and valleys around the world. Nothing is hurried, nothing is wasted. Each part contributes to a larger harmony that persists through time. Perhaps this is why orchids have inspired such admiration across cultures and centuries. Their beauty is undeniable, yet it is not merely visual. The deeper one understands their biology, the more their quiet resilience becomes apparent. Orchids survive through patience, cooperation, and adaptability. They flourish by conserving energy, responding carefully to environmental changes, and investing years of preparation before revealing their flowers. These qualities are not dramatic, but they are enduring. They remind us that lasting achievements in nature often arise gradually, shaped by consistency rather than urgency. The orchid does not bloom to impress the world. It blooms because conditions are right, because seasons have aligned, and because countless invisible processes have quietly prepared for that moment. Even after the flowers fade, the orchid's story continues. Leaves remain active, capturing light and storing energy. Roots explore their surroundings slowly, strengthening connections with their environment. Hidden fungal partners continue exchanging nutrients beneath the surface. Growth may appear still from the outside, yet within the plant, life proceeds steadily. Scientists know that these quieter periods are not empty intervals. They are essential phases of renewal and preparation, allowing orchids to gather strength for future seasons. There is something comforting in this rhythm, where activity alternates naturally with rest, and where periods of stillness carry their own quiet purpose. As thoughts drift gently alongside these peaceful scientific reflections, one can imagine orchids scattered across the globe, each living according to the same ancient principles. In tropical forests, they rest among rain-soaked branches. On cool mountain slopes, they gather moisture from drifting clouds. In hidden valleys and shaded woodlands, they wait patiently through changing seasons, confident in rhythms shaped by millions of years of adaptation. Their flowers will bloom again when the time is right. Their roots will continue exploring quietly. Their leaves will gather light with patient consistency, and so the orchid's story flows onward without urgency, carried softly through forests, across mountains, and beneath countless evenings much like this one. It is a story of quiet endurance, of hidden partnerships, of beauty emerging slowly through time. And as the world settles deeper into silence, orchids continue their ancient and peaceful existence, growing gently beneath the stars, exactly as they have done for ages beyond memory, and exactly as they will continue to do for many peaceful seasons yet to come. As we continue following the quiet life of orchids, it becomes easier to see them not as isolated plants, but as long-term participants in Earth's slow biological memory. Each orchid carries within it a record of environmental conditions shaped over countless generations. Temperature shifts, rainfall patterns, soil chemistry, forest density, and even the presence of specific pollinators have all influenced how orchids evolved into their present forms. Scientists studying evolutionary ecology often describe this as a kind of living archive, where every trait reflects a response to something the plant's ancestors once encountered. A flower's shape may hint at an ancient pollinator interaction. A root structure may reflect adaptation to a particular moisture cycle. Even the timing of flowering can echo climatic rhythms that have existed for thousands of years. Orchids, in this sense, are not just living organisms. They are quiet historical records, unfolding slowly in real time, shaped by a past that continues to live within their biology. One of the most subtle aspects of orchid life is how deeply they are tuned to environmental consistency. While many organisms can adapt quickly to change, orchids often rely on stability. A slight shift in temperature range or humidity patterns can influence whether they bloom successfully in a given year. This sensitivity is not weakness. It reflects a finely balanced relationship with their surroundings. Over long periods of evolution, orchids have learned to synchronize their life cycles with predictable patterns in nature. Rainy seasons signal growth. Dry periods may slow activity. Gradual changes in daylight help determine when energy should be directed toward flowering. Scientists studying plant phenology have noted that orchids often serve as biological indicators of ecosystem health because of this sensitivity. When orchids thrive, it often suggests that the surrounding environment remains in balance. When they struggle, it can signal subtle changes in ecological conditions that might otherwise go unnoticed. In tropical ecosystems, where many orchids reach their greatest diversity, this balance becomes especially intricate. Rainforests operate through constant cycles of renewal, where organic matter decomposes quickly and nutrients are continuously recycled. Orchids growing in these environments depend on this rapid but stable flow of resources. Their roots interact with decaying material, fungi, and microbial communities in ways that allow them to access nutrients efficiently without exhausting their surroundings. This relationship creates a quiet harmony between consumption and renewal. Nothing in the system remains static. Leaves fall, decompose, and return to the soil. Water rises into the atmosphere and returns as rain. Orchids participate gently in these cycles, neither dominating nor disappearing, but existing as steady contributors to the ongoing rhythm of the forest. Even the act of flowering, which appears so graceful and still, is the result of intense biological coordination. Inside the orchid, cells respond to hormonal signals that accumulate gradually over time. These signals integrate information from the environment, such as temperature changes or seasonal light variation. When internal thresholds are reached, developmental pathways activate, and the transformation from vegetative growth to flowering begins. Buds form slowly, protected by layers of tissue as they develop. Petals take shape over days or weeks. Pigments accumulate, and reproductive structures mature in precise sequence. To an outside observer, the moment of blooming may seem sudden. In reality, it is the culmination of a long, carefully regulated process unfolding at a pace that aligns with the plant's overall rhythm of life. Scientists often find this aspect of orchids particularly striking because it demonstrates how complexity can build quietly beneath stillness until it becomes visible in a single, delicate moment. The relationship between orchids and their pollinators adds yet another layer of quiet sophistication. In many ecosystems, orchids rely on highly specific pollination strategies. Some attract bees, others butterflies, moths, birds, or even small flies. Each interaction depends on precise compatibility between flower structure and pollinator behavior. The positioning of reproductive organs, the shape of petals, and the timing of fragrance release all contribute to successful pollination. Over evolutionary time, these relationships can become so specialized that certain orchids depend on a single pollinator species. This creates a delicate balance where the survival of both organisms is linked. Scientists studying co-evolution often describe these relationships as ongoing dialogues between species, shaped by mutual influence across generations. Orchids, in this sense, are participants in long ecological conversations that have continued uninterrupted for millions of years. At the same time, orchids demonstrate remarkable adaptability within these specialized relationships. If environmental conditions shift gradually over time, some species are able to adjust their flowering timing, scent production, or even flower shape in response to changes in pollinator populations. This flexibility helps explain why orchids have persisted through major climatic events in Earth's history. Ice ages, warming periods, and shifting continents have all influenced their distribution, yet orchids have continued to evolve and diversify. Their survival reflects a combination of specialization and adaptability, a balance that allows them to maintain close ecological relationships while still responding to broader environmental changes. As night settles deeper and the world becomes quieter still, it is easy to imagine orchids continuing their slow existence across countless landscapes. In some places, they rest quietly on tree branches high above forest floors, surrounded by drifting mist and filtered light. In others, they grow close to the ground, hidden among leaf litter and moss, waiting patiently for the right conditions to reveal their flowers. In mountain regions, they endure cool air and shifting weather patterns, adapting gently to seasonal cycles. Across all these environments, orchids share a common rhythm of life that unfolds without urgency, guided by patience, adaptation, and quiet cooperation with the natural world. And so, as this long exploration continues, orchids remain steady companions in thought. Their story does not rush toward an ending. It expands slowly, like the forests they inhabit, layer upon layer of relationships, adaptations, and quiet processes unfolding across time. In their presence, one can sense a deeper pattern in nature, where life persists not through haste, but through balance, patience, and the gentle unfolding of change across endless, peaceful seasons. As the quiet study of orchids continues, another layer of their existence begins to stand out, one that is often overlooked because it unfolds so slowly that it almost disappears into the background of time. Orchids are not only shaped by their environment, they also help shape it in return, in subtle and often invisible ways. When an orchid grows on a tree branch, it does not simply occupy space, it becomes part of a small ecosystem forming around that branch. Moisture gathers differently where its roots spread. Tiny insects shelter among its leaves. Fungi and microorganisms interact with the decaying organic matter that collects nearby. Over time, these small changes contribute to a slightly altered microenvironment, a miniature world within the larger forest. Scientists who study epiphytic communities often describe them as layered habitats, where each organism influences conditions for others in quiet, continuous feedback loops. Orchids participate in these loops gently, without dominance, but with steady presence, becoming part of the forest's living architecture. This idea of subtle influence extends even to the way orchids interact with light. In dense forests, sunlight is one of the most limited resources, and every plant competes for access to it. Yet orchids often occupy positions where they do not compete directly with ground-dwelling plants. By growing on trees, they access filtered light from above, allowing them to exist in a different layer of the ecosystem. This vertical distribution of life is one of the defining features of rainforest structure. The canopy forms one world, the understory another, and the forest floor yet another. Orchids are part of this vertical complexity, occupying niches that allow them to coexist with a vast range of other species. In doing so, they help increase overall biodiversity, not by force, but by fitting themselves into available spaces with remarkable efficiency. The structure of orchid leaves also reflects this careful adaptation to light. In shaded environments, leaves often become thin and broad, maximizing surface area for capturing diffuse sunlight. In brighter environments, leaves may develop thicker tissues and protective layers to reduce water loss and prevent damage from intense light exposure. Within the leaf, chloroplasts adjust their arrangement depending on light conditions, shifting slightly to optimize energy capture. These adjustments occur gradually and continuously, guided by both genetic programming and environmental feedback. Scientists studying plant physiology have found that orchids are particularly responsive to changes in light intensity, capable of adjusting their internal processes in ways that support long-term survival rather than short-term gain. This measured response reflects the broader pattern seen throughout orchid biology, a preference for balance over excess and for stability over rapid fluctuation. Even underground, where much of an orchid's life remains hidden, complexity continues. The relationship between orchid roots and fungal networks is not static. It changes over time depending on environmental conditions, nutrient availability, and the developmental stage of the plant. In early growth stages, orchids rely heavily on fungal partners for nutrients. As they mature and develop the ability to photosynthesize more effectively, the balance of exchange may shift. Some orchids become more self-sufficient, while still maintaining their fungal connections. Others continue to depend significantly on these underground relationships throughout their lives. Scientists studying these interactions have discovered that fungal networks themselves are incredibly diverse, forming vast underground systems that connect multiple plants across an ecosystem. In some cases, nutrients can move between different species of plants through these networks, creating a hidden web of exchange beneath the forest floor. Orchids are part of this network, participating in exchanges that are essential for their development and long-term survival. As the understanding of orchids deepens, it becomes increasingly clear that their lives are defined by relationships at every scale. From microscopic interactions within cells to large-scale ecological connections across forests, orchids exist within layers of dependency and cooperation. Even their reproduction depends on timing and alignment with external conditions that are never fully under their control. Yet rather than resisting this dependence, orchids have evolved to work with it, integrating themselves into the rhythms of the environments they inhabit. This approach to life reflects a form of biological humility, where survival is achieved not through isolation, but through integration into larger systems of support. In many ways, orchids demonstrate how life can flourish by embracing interconnection rather than independence. Their seeds drift through air currents, relying on chance to find suitable environments. Their roots depend on fungi for nourishment during early stages of growth. Their flowers depend on pollinators to carry genetic material across distances. Each stage of their life is shaped by interaction with other forms of life. Yet within this network of dependencies, orchids maintain their own identity, expressing unique forms, colors, and fragrances that distinguish one species from another. This balance between individuality and interdependence is one of the most fascinating aspects of orchid biology. It shows that connection does not erase uniqueness. Instead, it often allows it to emerge more fully within a broader system of relationships. As evening deepens once again in this unfolding exploration, it becomes easier to imagine orchids continuing their quiet existence across countless unseen landscapes. Some are suspended high in mist-filled canopies, where clouds drift slowly through branches. Others rest in shaded valleys, where light filters softly through layers of green. Some endure seasonal changes in mountain regions, while others thrive in warm tropical air that remains steady throughout the year. In every place, orchids respond to their surroundings with patience and subtle adjustment, growing, resting, flowering, and renewing in cycles that extend far beyond the pace of human observation. And so their story continues without interruption, shaped by time, relationship, and quiet adaptation. Orchids do not demand attention, yet they reward it deeply when it is given. They remind us that life often unfolds most profoundly in slow, steady patterns, where change is gradual, connections are essential, and beauty emerges not suddenly, but through the patient accumulation of countless small moments across the long and gentle passage of time. As the exploration of orchids moves even deeper, it becomes increasingly clear that their story is not only one of biology, but also of balance within entire living systems. Orchids do not exist in isolation at any stage of their lives. Even when a single flower appears alone on a branch or stem, it is still connected to a much wider network of relationships that stretch through soil, air, water, fungi, insects, and surrounding vegetation. This interconnectedness is not immediately visible, yet it is always present, shaping every aspect of growth and survival. Scientists studying ecological networks often emphasize that no organism truly exists independently in nature. Instead, each species participates in continuous exchanges of energy and information. Orchids are especially clear examples of this principle because their lives depend so visibly on cooperation at nearly every stage, from seed germination to flowering and reproduction. One of the most remarkable aspects of this cooperation is how early it begins. Even before an orchid seed can be considered a seedling, it must establish a relationship with a compatible fungus. Without this connection, growth cannot begin. The fungus provides essential nutrients that the tiny seed cannot produce on its own. In return, once the orchid matures, it may eventually contribute resources back to the fungal network. This exchange forms the foundation of the orchid's life, and it highlights a broader truth about natural systems. Survival is often built upon relationships that begin long before visible growth occurs. What appears to be a solitary plant is, in reality, part of a deeply interconnected system that supports its existence from the very beginning. As orchids mature, their dependence on environmental relationships does not diminish. Instead, it evolves into new forms. The plant begins to interact more directly with light, air, and pollinators, while still maintaining its hidden underground connections. Each of these relationships plays a role in shaping growth patterns and reproductive success. Pollinators, in particular, introduce a dynamic element into the orchid's life cycle. Unlike the relatively stable relationship with fungi, pollinator interactions are often variable and influenced by seasonal changes, weather patterns, and broader ecological conditions. An orchid may flower at a specific time of year to coincide with the activity of certain insects or birds. If those pollinators are absent or less active, reproductive success may decline. This sensitivity highlights how finely tuned orchids are to the rhythms of their environments. The precision of these relationships is especially evident in the structure of orchid flowers. Many species have evolved highly specialized shapes that guide pollinators in very specific ways. Petals may form narrow passages that only certain insects can navigate. Nectar may be positioned in locations that require precise movement to access. Pollen may attach to specific parts of a pollinator's body to ensure transfer to another flower. These adaptations are not random. They are the result of long-term evolutionary processes in which small variations that improved reproductive success were gradually preserved over generations. Over time, these incremental changes led to the extraordinary diversity of orchid forms seen today. Each species represents a unique evolutionary pathway shaped by interaction with its environment. Yet, despite this diversity, orchids share a common underlying strategy. They invest heavily in ensuring that each reproductive event has a high chance of success. Rather than producing a few large seeds with high survival rates, they produce vast numbers of tiny seeds with lower individual survival probability. This strategy may seem uncertain at first glance, but it is highly effective over long periods of time. By dispersing large numbers of seeds widely, orchids increase the likelihood that some will find suitable conditions for growth. This approach reflects a broader pattern in nature, where quantity and distribution often compensate for individual fragility. In the case of orchids, this balance has allowed them to spread across nearly every continent and adapt to an extraordinary range of environments. As we continue to observe orchids through the lens of science, their adaptability becomes one of their most defining characteristics. They are not fixed in form or behavior. Instead, they respond continuously to environmental cues, adjusting growth, reproduction, and resource use as conditions change. This flexibility allows them to persist even in environments that fluctuate over time. For example, in regions where rainfall varies seasonally, orchids may enter periods of reduced activity during dry months and resume growth when moisture returns. In cooler climates, they may slow their metabolic processes during winter and re-emerge with renewed growth in spring. These cycles reflect an ongoing dialogue between the plant and its environment, where survival depends on careful timing and responsiveness. At the cellular level, this responsiveness is governed by complex biochemical systems. Hormones regulate growth patterns, signaling when to produce leaves, when to conserve energy, and when to initiate flowering. Gene expression shifts in response to environmental inputs, allowing the plant to adjust its internal processes accordingly. These mechanisms operate continuously, even when no visible changes are occurring. Scientists studying plant biology often describe this internal regulation as a form of constant adjustment, where stability is maintained not through rigidity, but through ongoing fine-tuning. Orchids exemplify this principle beautifully, maintaining equilibrium through continuous adaptation. As night settles more fully and the world becomes increasingly quiet, it is easy to imagine these processes continuing unnoticed across countless hidden environments. Orchids remain active in their own slow and steady way, responding to subtle shifts in temperature, light, and moisture. Their roots continue to explore their surroundings, their leaves continue to gather energy, and their flowers appear when conditions align with ancient biological rhythms. Nothing about their existence is rushed. Yet nothing is idle. Every stage of their life is part of a continuous flow of activity that unfolds gradually over time. And so, as this long reflection continues, orchids remain steady reminders of how life can exist in harmony with time rather than in opposition to it. They demonstrate that growth does not need to be fast to be meaningful, and that complexity can emerge quietly through countless small interactions. Across forests, mountains, valleys, and distant islands, they continue their unhurried journey, rooted in connection, shaped by environment, and carried forward by the gentle persistence of life unfolding slowly, patiently, and continuously through the long and peaceful passage of time. As the study of orchids continues to unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that their quiet existence is deeply tied to cycles that extend far beyond individual plants. Orchids do not simply grow within ecosystems, they participate in them as ongoing processes, responding to shifts in climate, seasonal patterns, and the slow transformation of landscapes over time. In many ways, they can be seen as long-term witnesses of environmental change. A single orchid may remain rooted in the same place for many years, experiencing variations in rainfall, temperature, and surrounding vegetation. Over time, these subtle changes accumulate, influencing growth patterns and reproductive timing. Scientists who observe long-lived plant species often note that such organisms act as living records of environmental history, preserving within their biology traces of the conditions they have experienced across decades. Orchids, with their sensitivity and longevity, fit this description especially well. One of the most important environmental factors influencing orchids is water availability. Even in humid ecosystems, moisture is not always constant. Rain may arrive in intense bursts, followed by quieter periods, and humidity levels can shift throughout the day. Orchids have developed a range of strategies to respond to this variability. Their roots, especially in epiphytic species, are capable of rapid water absorption when moisture becomes available. The velamen layer acts almost like a temporary reservoir, capturing water quickly and releasing it gradually into the plant's internal tissues. This system allows orchids to take advantage of brief opportunities while maintaining stability during drier periods. Some species also store water in specialized structures, enabling them to endure extended periods without direct rainfall. These adaptations reflect a broader theme in orchid biology: the ability to manage resources carefully over time, ensuring survival even when conditions fluctuate. Temperature is another subtle but important influence on orchid life. Many species are highly sensitive to thermal changes, and even small variations can affect metabolic activity. In cooler environments, growth may slow as the plant conserves energy. In warmer conditions, metabolic processes may accelerate, allowing for faster development. Some orchids rely on seasonal temperature shifts as cues for flowering, ensuring that reproduction occurs at a time when pollinators are most active. This synchronization between plant and environment highlights the intricate timing mechanisms that regulate orchid life cycles. Inside the plant, temperature changes influence enzyme activity and hormonal signaling pathways, which in turn guide developmental processes. These internal responses occur gradually, allowing the orchid to adjust its growth in a controlled and measured way. Light availability also plays a central role in shaping orchid behavior. In dense forests, where sunlight is filtered through multiple layers of foliage, orchids must adapt to low light conditions. Their leaves often develop increased surface area to capture as much light as possible, and their photosynthetic systems become highly efficient at processing limited energy input. In contrast, orchids growing in more open environments may need to protect themselves from excessive light exposure. In such cases, leaves may develop thicker protective layers or altered pigment concentrations to reduce damage from intense sunlight. This flexibility in response to light conditions allows orchids to occupy a wide range of habitats, from deep forest shade to exposed mountain slopes. Beyond physical environmental factors, orchids also depend on biological interactions that influence their survival and reproduction. The relationship between orchids and pollinators is one of the most intricate examples of coevolution in the natural world. Over time, Specific orchid species have evolved to attract particular pollinators through combinations of shape, color, fragrance, and timing. Some orchids produce scents that mimic food sources or even mating signals of insects, guiding pollinators toward the flower in highly specialized ways. Others rely on visual cues that are only visible to certain animals, such as ultraviolet patterns that guide insects to nectar sources. These interactions are the result of long-term evolutionary processes in which small advantages in pollination success were gradually reinforced across generations. The result is a remarkable diversity of forms, each shaped by its own unique ecological relationships. Fungal partnerships remain equally essential throughout the orchid's life. Even after germination, many orchids continue to rely on fungi for nutrient exchange. These relationships can vary in complexity depending on species and environment. In some cases, the orchid becomes partially independent as it matures, while still maintaining a connection with its fungal partners. In others, the relationship remains strong throughout the plant's life. The fungal networks themselves are vast and interconnected, extending through soil and organic matter in ways that link multiple plants together. Through these networks, nutrients and energy can move between different organisms, creating a hidden system of exchange that supports ecosystem stability. Orchids are active participants in this system, contributing to and benefiting from the shared flow of resources. As we consider these interconnected systems, it becomes clear that orchids are not defined by isolation, but by relationship. Their existence depends on continuous interaction with a wide range of biological and environmental factors. Yet within this network of dependencies, orchids maintain their unique identity, expressed through distinct forms, colors, and growth patterns. This balance between individuality and interconnection is one of the most remarkable aspects of their biology. It demonstrates that complexity in nature often arises not from separation, but from integration. Even the slow passage of time plays a defining role in orchid life. Their growth is not rapid or dramatic, but gradual and steady. Each stage of development unfolds over extended periods, allowing the plant to adjust carefully to its surroundings. This slow rhythm may seem uneventful from a human perspective, yet it is precisely this pace that allows orchids to achieve such remarkable diversity and adaptability. Over long spans of time, small changes accumulate, shaping new species and new ecological relationships. The result is a family of plants that reflects millions of years of quiet evolutionary refinement. As this exploration continues into the deeper layers of orchid existence, what becomes most apparent is not their fragility, but their resilience expressed through patience. They endure not by resisting change, but by adapting to it gradually. They persist not through speed, but through balance. And as night settles once again across the world, orchids continue their quiet presence in forests, mountains, and hidden landscapes, growing slowly, responding gently, and existing in harmony with the long and unhurried rhythms of the natural world that surrounds them. As the reflection on orchids continues to deepen, it becomes even clearer that their existence is shaped by a kind of patience that operates on multiple layers of time at once. There is the immediate rhythm of daily light and moisture, the seasonal rhythm of growth and rest, and then the far longer rhythm of evolutionary change, stretching across thousands and even millions of years. Orchids exist at the intersection of all these timelines, responding gently to each one without losing their overall balance. A single change in rainfall may influence a week of growth. A seasonal shift may influence a year of flowering. A gradual climate trend may influence the direction of evolution across entire lineages. Yet through all of this, orchids maintain a continuity of form and function that allows them to remain recognizable, even as they diversify into thousands of species across the globe. One of the most subtle aspects of orchid life is how energy is allocated within the plant over time. Unlike organisms that grow rapidly and reproduce quickly, orchids often invest heavily in long-term stability. A significant portion of their energy is directed toward maintaining root systems, supporting fungal partnerships, and ensuring that leaves remain functional over extended periods. This careful allocation of resources allows them to survive in environments where conditions may not always be favorable for growth. Scientists studying plant physiology often describe orchids as highly efficient in their energy management. Rather than expending resources rapidly, they distribute energy gradually, ensuring that essential functions can continue even during periods of environmental stress. This strategy reflects a broader ecological principle in which long-term survival often depends on conservation rather than acceleration. In many orchid habitats, environmental unpredictability is a constant presence. Rainfall may vary from year to year, temperatures may fluctuate unexpectedly, and surrounding vegetation may change slowly over time. Orchids respond to this uncertainty with remarkable flexibility. Their growth patterns are not rigidly fixed, but responsive to current conditions. If resources are abundant, growth may accelerate slightly. If conditions become less favorable, growth may slow without stopping entirely. This ability to modulate activity allows orchids to maintain stability even in dynamic environments. Scientists refer to this as plasticity in development, a trait that enables organisms to adjust their form and function in response to changing circumstances. In orchids, this plasticity is expressed not only in physical structure but also in timing, reproduction, and ecological interactions. The role of fungi in orchid life continues to reveal new layers of complexity as research advances. These fungal partners are not simply external helpers. They form intricate networks that connect multiple plants across ecosystems. Through these underground pathways, nutrients and signals can move between organisms in ways that are still not fully understood. Some studies suggest that these networks may even allow indirect communication between plants, influencing growth patterns and resource distribution across a shared environment. Orchids participate in these systems in ways that vary depending on species and life stage. In early development, the relationship is often essential and deeply dependent. As the orchid matures, it may become more balanced in its exchanges, contributing resources back to the fungal network while continuing to receive support when needed. This dynamic relationship highlights the fluid nature of ecological interactions, where roles are not fixed but continuously adjusted over time. Above ground, the relationship between orchids and pollinators adds another dimension of interaction. Each flowering event represents a carefully timed opportunity for reproduction, dependent on the presence and behavior of specific animals. The precision of these interactions is often astonishing. In some species, flower structures align so precisely with the bodies of pollinators that successful reproduction depends on exact positioning during visitation. Slight variations in petal angle or nectar placement can influence whether pollen is transferred effectively. Over evolutionary time, these fine details have been refined through countless interactions between plants and pollinators. The result is a system of biological coordination that operates with remarkable subtlety, ensuring that reproduction occurs efficiently within the constraints of the environment. Orchid flowers also demonstrate a wide range of visual strategies that reflect their ecological roles. Some species produce bright, vivid colors that stand out against green backgrounds, while others rely on subtle patterns that are only visible under certain light conditions. These visual traits are not designed for human appreciation, but for communication with specific pollinators. Insects, such as bees and butterflies, perceive color differently from humans, and orchids have evolved to match these perceptual systems. Ultraviolet markings, for example, can create patterns that guide insects toward nectar sources with precision. What appears to the human eye as a simple flower may, in the perception of a pollinator, be a detailed map guiding movement and behavior. This difference in perception highlights the complexity of ecological communication, where meaning is shaped by the sensory abilities of different organisms. As orchids continue their quiet existence across the globe, their diversity serves as a reminder of the many ways life can adapt to similar challenges. Different species may occupy very different habitats, yet all share the same fundamental strategies of resource management, ecological interaction, and gradual adaptation. Some orchids grow high in tropical canopies, exposed to wind and filtered light. Others grow close to the ground in shaded forests. Some thrive in humid environments where moisture is abundant, while others survive in more variable conditions by carefully regulating water use. Despite these differences, all orchids remain connected through shared evolutionary origins and common biological principles. Time, perhaps more than any other factor, defines the orchid experience. Their lives unfold slowly, allowing for careful adjustment and long-term stability. Even dramatic changes in environment are met with gradual responses rather than sudden shifts. This slow rhythm may seem uneventful from a human perspective, yet it is precisely this pacing that allows orchids to persist across changing landscapes and shifting climates. Over long periods, small adjustments accumulate, leading to the emergence of new forms and new ecological relationships. In this way, orchids demonstrate how continuity and change can coexist, shaping life through processes that are both steady and adaptive. As this long journey of reflection continues, orchids remain quietly present in the background of the natural world. Their roots extend through hidden networks, their leaves capture light in shifting patterns, and their flowers appear only when conditions align with ancient rhythms. They do not rush toward growth or resist change. Instead, they move with it, responding gently and consistently to the world around them. In doing so, they embody a form of biological patience that has allowed them to endure for millions of years, carrying forward their quiet existence across forests, mountains, and valleys, through countless seasons and across the long and steady unfolding of time. As this quiet exploration of orchids continues, the sense of scale around their existence becomes even more expansive. An orchid is never just a single plant in a single moment. It is the outcome of countless earlier conditions, and at the same time, a starting point for countless future possibilities. Every leaf that unfolds carries within it the influence of past seasons. Every root that extends into bark or soil participates in relationships that have been forming since germination. Every flower represents not an isolated event, but a carefully timed convergence of internal readiness and external conditions. Scientists often describe this as developmental continuity, where life is understood as a continuous flow rather than a sequence of disconnected stages. Orchids embody this idea with particular clarity, because their transitions are gradual, layered, and deeply responsive to subtle environmental cues. Within this continuity, one of the most remarkable features of orchids is how they manage uncertainty. Natural environments are never perfectly predictable. Rain may come early or late, temperatures may shift unexpectedly, and ecological relationships may change over time. Yet orchids persist within this uncertainty by maintaining flexibility in their growth and reproduction. Their biological systems are not designed to follow a rigid schedule. Instead, they respond to thresholds and signals, allowing them to adjust timing based on real conditions rather than fixed expectations. This flexibility reduces risk in environments where stability cannot always be guaranteed. Scientists studying plant resilience often emphasize that such adaptive timing is one of the key strategies that allows long-lived species to persist through environmental variability. The orchid's relationship with its surroundings is also shaped by constant exchange. Carbon dioxide enters through leaves and is transformed into sugars through photosynthesis. Water is absorbed through roots and redistributed throughout tissues. Minerals are gathered from bark, soil, or decaying organic matter. At the same time, oxygen, moisture, and organic compounds are released back into the environment. This continuous exchange ensures that the orchid is never truly separate from its surroundings. Instead, it exists as part of a dynamic flow of matter and energy. Ecologists often describe this as metabolic integration, where the boundaries between organism and environment are functionally permeable. Orchids, especially epiphytic species, demonstrate this integration vividly, existing suspended between air and surface, constantly interacting with both. Even at a microscopic level, orchids reveal this interconnectedness. Inside their tissues, cells communicate through chemical signals that regulate growth and development. Hormones move from one part of the plant to another, coordinating responses to environmental conditions. If a leaf receives more light, it may influence energy distribution to other parts of the plant. If roots detect changes in moisture, they may signal adjustments in growth rate. These internal communications occur continuously and without centralized control, forming a distributed system of regulation. Scientists often compare this to a network rather than a hierarchy, where coordination emerges from many interacting components rather than a single controlling center. This distributed organization allows orchids to respond efficiently to changing conditions while maintaining overall stability. The orchid's flowering process represents one of the most visible expressions of this internal coordination. Long before a flower becomes visible, developmental changes are already underway within the plant. Bud formation begins subtly, guided by hormonal signals influenced by environmental factors. Over time, these buds develop protective structures that shield them as they grow. Only when internal and external conditions align does the flower begin to open. This process is carefully regulated, ensuring that flowering occurs when the likelihood of successful pollination is highest. The timing is not random. It reflects accumulated environmental information processed over time by the plant's internal systems. When the flower finally opens, it represents not a sudden event, but the visible outcome of a long, invisible preparation. Orchid diversity continues to reveal the extraordinary range of possibilities that evolution can produce from shared biological foundations. Some orchids produce flowers that last only a short time, while others remain open for extended periods. Some rely on strong visual signals to attract pollinators, while others depend more heavily on scent or structural mimicry. There are orchids that resemble insects, orchids that resemble birds, and orchids that take on shapes that seem almost sculptural in their complexity. Yet beneath this diversity lies a shared structure of reproductive strategy, root-fungal association, and environmental responsiveness. This combination of variation and continuity is one of the most striking features of the orchid family. It demonstrates how evolution can explore an almost limitless range of forms while preserving underlying biological coherence. In many orchid species, survival also depends on subtle spatial awareness. The position of an orchid within its environment can influence its access to light, moisture, and pollinators. A few centimeters of difference on a tree trunk can alter the amount of sunlight a plant receives throughout the day. Slight variations in elevation can affect humidity levels or exposure to wind. Orchids respond to these micro-environmental differences by adjusting growth direction and resource allocation. Their roots may extend toward areas of higher moisture. Their leaves may orient themselves to capture more effective light. Over time, these small adjustments allow the plant to optimize its position within its immediate surroundings. This form of spatial responsiveness is another example of how orchids engage continuously with their environment in subtle but meaningful ways. As the broader ecological context is considered, orchids also serve as indicators of environmental continuity and change. Because they are sensitive to shifts in climate and habitat conditions, changes in orchid populations can reflect broader ecological trends. A decline in certain orchid species may signal alterations in humidity, temperature, or pollinator presence. Conversely, stable or thriving orchid populations may suggest ecological stability within a given region. Scientists studying biodiversity often use orchids as part of larger assessments of ecosystem health. Their presence, abundance, and diversity provide valuable insights into the condition of complex natural systems. And so, as this long reflection continues, orchids remain quietly embedded within the larger fabric of life on Earth. They do not exist apart from their environments, nor do they dominate them. Instead, they participate in ongoing cycles of interaction, adjustment, and renewal. Their lives unfold gradually, shaped by light, water, fungi, pollinators, and time itself. Across forests, mountains, valleys, and hidden ecosystems, they continue their slow and steady existence, adapting gently to change while maintaining continuity across generations. In this way, orchids offer a consistent reminder that life often thrives not through speed or intensity, but through patience, balance, and sustained connection. Their story is not one of sudden transformation, but of continuous unfolding, where every moment is part of a larger process that stretches far beyond what can be seen at once. And as night continues its calm passage, Orchids remain present in countless quiet places around the world, growing steadily, responding gently, and carrying forward their ancient and unbroken rhythm through the long, soft flow of time.